Sleep didn't take me all at once. It pulled me under slowly until the room softened around me, and the last thing I could still feel was the faint trace of sandalwood and cedar. Then I opened my eyes, and Victor was already there. Not hidden, not distant, waiting for me like he belonged in my dreams, or like I belonged in his. Chapter 6. The Dragon, the Horde, and the Choice. Sleep didn't take me all at once. It pulled slowly, the room loosening around me rather than disappearing, the edges softening as the weight of the day settled into something heavier than exhaustion, but not quite rest. My body gave in first, muscles unwinding in pieces, tension slipping free in ways I didn't notice until it was already gone. My fingers uncurled against the blankets, my knees loosened. Even the tight, guarded set of my shoulders softened inch by inch, like I was being coaxed rather than claimed by sleep. But my mind lingered. The last thing that stayed with me was the faint trace of it, sandalwood, cedar, something colder beneath, and the way my wolf had leaned toward it instead of away. The memory of that scent sat low in me, warm and secret, like I had tucked an ember under my ribs and carried it to bed. Then even that slipped, and I was somewhere else, not a different place, the same one, or something shaped from it. Stone stretched beneath my feet, but it wasn't the dormitory anymore. The space felt wider, older, like something that had existed long before walls, or rules, or names. Light moved strangely here, soft and dim at once, with no clear source, and yet everywhere. It silvered the edges of things without fully revealing them, as if the room preferred mystery. I wasn't alone. I knew that before I turned.
Hey, wolf girl.
His voice was close, too close. I turned anyway. Victor stood a few steps away, no longer hidden in shadow, but fully present in a way that made everything else feel less real by comparison. The weight of him pressed into the space, as if it couldn't be contained by his physical body. He didn't just occupy the room, he altered it. His eyes found mine immediately. That green. I couldn't look away, like I was pinned in place. What kind of power pinned someone in place with a gaze alone? And worse, I was drawn to it. His eyes were deeper here, brighter, as if whatever part of him he kept contained had no reason to hide with me. "Hi," I said, softer than I meant to, the word slipping out of me before I could steady it. Heat rose to my face before I could stop it. I tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear on instinct, suddenly too aware of the sound of my own voice, the shape of my mouth, the way I was standing under his attention. My weight shifted to one leg without meaning to, my knees drawing just slightly closer together, which only made me feel more exposed. His mouth curved, that same smirk. Gods, that smirk. It made something low in me turn liquid. He didn't move. He didn't need to. The space between us wasn't distance anymore. It was tension, drawn tight, pulling, the kind that made me aware of my breathing, of my pulse in my throat, of the thin brush of fabric against my skin. "What are you doing here?" I asked, forcing my voice steadier. That seemed to interest him, not surprise him, interest him.
Am I really here?
He asked lightly, tilting his head, studying me in a way that felt less like observation and more like appraisal.
Or am I what your body conjured once it learned what it wanted?
My wolf stirred, not defensive, aware, hopeful. My lips parted before I spoke, and I hated that he noticed that too. "I don't have these dreams," I started, then stopped. The words didn't hold. His gaze didn't waver.
That was before you met me.
Something in my chest tightened. I stepped forward without meaning to, closing the distance just enough to feel the shift in the air, the way everything sharpened the closer I got to him. My hand lifted a little from my side, as if I meant to catch my balance on something, then hovered uselessly in the space between us before I let it fall again. Even in a dream, my body seemed to understand that moving closer to him was different than moving closer to anyone else. Stones and bones. What is this? The thought slipped through me, unsteady. The ground beneath my feet changed. Not all at once, not in a way I could point to, but the stone was no longer just stone. Something gleamed at the edges of it, gold at first, then more, spilling outward in quiet accumulation, as if the floor itself had begun to shed wealth. Coins, gems, metal, silk, soft things layered over harder ones. The air grew warmer, thicker, carrying that same scent more strongly now. Stars and stones. Had he just altered the dream? My dream? Sandalwood, cedar, home. Victor didn't look around. He didn't react. Like this wasn't new. Like this was where he always stood. His eyes flickered, tracking me instead.
He
began, his voice lowering slightly, not softer, but heavier. It felt like he didn't just see me. It felt like he saw through me, with those maddeningly green, knowing eyes.
Beautiful.
The word struck deeper than it should have. I didn't believe it, and yet I didn't reject it. My throat worked around a swallow. My fingers curled lightly against my palm. I became abruptly conscious of everything feminine and vulnerable about having that word spoken over me like that. The heat in my cheeks, the softness of my mouth, the way my body had gone still under his gaze. I couldn't move, couldn't think. All I could feel was him and the pull.
You've stolen something from me,
He said suddenly, almost idly, like the realization amused him. The words cut clean, sharp. My breath hitched. What? I barely managed. He tilted his head slightly.
My attention.
His mouth curved.
Do you know how rare that is?
His gaze slid over me again, deliberate, possessive in a way that made my pulse jump.
Do you know what dragons do to thieves?
The space tightened, not around him, around me. My wolf didn't retreat. She leaned forward, drunk, dizzy with need.
Why am I so fascinated with you?
He asked quietly, as if the question mattered more than the threat.
Come closer.
Something in me leaned forward. Something else held. No. The word came out before I could soften it. That made him react. Not outwardly, but something shifted, subtle, precise.
Why?
He asked, his voice dipping lower, rougher now, his tone bordering on offended. Mother Moon, even his voice. The pull sharpened, dragging at me now, not distant, not imagined, but real enough to make my breath catch, to make heat settle low and impossible to ignore. My thighs pressed together for one fleeting, humiliating second before I could stop it. I hated how instinctive that was, hated more that I was grateful he couldn't possibly miss it. I took another step forward, even after I told him no, but I forced myself to stop. Why are you here? I managed. Each word felt like resistance, like pulling against something stronger than me. Victor stepped closer, just enough. The space between us thinned until I could feel him without contact, the heat of him, the weight of his presence pressing against mine. The horde shifted beneath my feet, silk sliding softly against my skin where it hadn't been before, lace brushing my thighs, gold pressing faintly beneath it all. The space reshaped itself without asking, without announcing, until I was standing inside something that felt dangerously close to the image that had flickered through my mind before sleep. I looked down instinctively, breath catching at the sight and feel of it. Silk whispered over my calves when I moved. Lace traced lightly at my thighs like a secret. The softness against my skin made me feel suddenly achingly aware of my body, of the curve of my hips, the bare line of my legs, the warm flush climbing beneath my skin. It was intimate in a way that felt almost unfair. How had he taken control of my own dream? Then the thought hit that made it worse. Worse, what if I'm still in control? He didn't notice. Or worse, this was simply natural to him. The scent was stronger here. Sandalwood, cedar, something darker.
Because I couldn't stay away.
He murmured. He circled me slowly, his fingers playing with my hair casually, like I already belonged to him. My wolf leaned into that. I should have stepped back. I didn't. Why are you doing this to me? I asked. I wasn't even sure what I meant anymore. His gaze dropped briefly to my mouth, then returned to my eyes.
Because I want you,
he said.
And dragons do not know how to want gently. But if I draw you into my horde, I'll burn down empires to keep you.
Simple, certain, true. My lips parted again before I could school them. I pressed them together a second too late, suddenly aware that I was doing exactly what prey in old stories probably did right before they got eaten, except prey didn't lean in, and I was leaning in. To be wanted by a dragon, I breathed, the words barely steady. That sounds like danger. His smile sharpened.
It is.
He took another slow breath, like he was savoring the scent of me inside his horde.
But not for you. Dragons do not destroy what they treasure. We burn the world around it first.
My heart stumbled. His hand lifted slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't. His fingers brushed my jaw, just along the edge of where the wound had been. The touch burned, not with pain, with something else. I leaned into it before I could stop myself, a soft sound escaping me, small and involuntary. My lashes fluttered shut for half a second, and when they opened again, he was watching me with that same terrible focus, like he'd felt every inch I gave him. I wanted to be here, in his horde, protected, guarded, desired, covered in silk and lace, among entire kingdoms worth of gold, moons and maidens. The wanting of it made me ache. His expression shifted, just slightly, satisfied. My hand rose of its own accord and caught lightly at his wrist, not to stop him, not really, but because I needed somewhere to put the trembling in my fingers. The gesture only made me feel smaller and softer under him, more his than my own.
Careful,
he murmured, his voice low against the space between us.
Once a dragon starts thinking of you as his, you're never free again.
Something inside me gave way. Yes, take me, keep me. Then I stopped myself, or tried to. I couldn't deny him, not fully, not completely, but enough for now. My thoughts blurred, slipping beneath the weight of sensation, of want, of something I didn't understand, but couldn't deny. My body had already begun answering for me in all the ways I was too embarrassed to name aloud. My breath shallower, my skin hotter, my mouth softer, my whole frame tuned toward him like a flower doing something far more dangerous than turning toward the sun. I knew with terrifying clarity that if he reached for me again, if he pulled me closer, I might not stop him. I might not want to. Please, I whispered. The word came out small, barely more than breath, and the sound of it made heat tighten low in my stomach. His slitted eyes darkened with something that looked almost reverent and almost hungry. I didn't know what I was asking for, and neither did he. The moment stretched and snapped. The world shifted violently, reality tearing back into place, as if something had reached into me and dragged me out by force. I came back to myself like I'd been dropped. My eyes flew open. My breath caught high in my throat, too sharp, too fast, and for one terrible second, I didn't know where I was. The room swam in pieces around me, pale stone, moonlight, the carved bedposts, below crackle of embers in the hearth, but my body did not believe any of it. My skin was still too warm, my mouth still felt soft. The place along my jaw where his fingers had brushed me burned with phantom heat so vivid, I lifted my hand to touch it before I could stop myself. Nothing, just skin. But the tremor in my fingers told its own story. I was lying twisted in the blankets, one knee half drawn up, the sheets tangled around my legs like I'd been fighting them. My breathing stayed uneven, no matter how I tried to steady it. The whole lower half of my body felt awake in a way that made humiliation crawl hot under my skin. My thighs pressed together instinctively. My wolf paced in my chest, restless and electric, not frightened, not even ashamed, hungry, impatient, restless. I swallowed hard and sat up too quickly. The room tilted. I caught myself on one hand against the mattress, breathing through it, and the motion made the blankets slide off my lap. Cool air brushed my legs. I shivered. It was a dream. The thought came fast and rang hollow. Dreams didn't usually leave my body feeling used up and sensitized, as if something had gotten its hands on me and not quite let go. Dreams didn't leave the memory of a voice lodged under my skin. Dreams didn't make the place on my jaw burn like a mark that hadn't been made yet. I touched it again anyway. My fingertips lingered there. The heat answered. "Spirits," I whispered. The word barely made it out. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and sat there for a moment, trying to gather myself. But my body felt split in two. One half wanted cold water, fresh air, distance, anything to make me feel like myself again. The other half wanted to crawl right back under the blankets, crawl back to him. That thought hit me hard enough to make me stand abruptly. No, absolutely not. I crossed to the mirror in my chamber, with bare feet whispering over stone. The girl who looked back at me did not look rested. My hair was mussed, loose around my shoulders, like someone had been running their hands through it. My cheeks were flushed, too high, too bright. My lips looked slightly swollen, softer than usual, and my eyes looked dazed, not sleepy, dazed, like a girl who had been kissed so vividly her body had not gotten the message that none of it had been real. A hot ache moved through me at the thought. I gripped the edge of the basin hard enough to whiten my knuckles. This would not do. Dinner. I needed dinner. Noise, people, light, something solid and ordinary enough to grind this out of me. The thought was almost laughable. Nothing at this school had been ordinary yet. Nothing in my life had ever stayed ordinary for long. I splashed cold water over my face once, twice. It helped my skin. It did nothing for the rest of me. By the time I opened the wardrobe, my hands were steadier, but not steady. I changed for dinner with the sort of concentration people used to defuse bombs. Every simple task seemed suddenly intimate. Fabric sliding over my skin too close, raising gooseflesh. The drag of denim over my thighs. Even the hug of my jeans around my hips. I had to stop twice just to breathe, because every brush of cloth against my body reminded me too much of silk, lace, gold, and the way the dream had shaped itself around me like a vision of smoke and desire. I nearly changed my outfit 3 times. The first felt too soft, the second too thin, the third made me look, to my own horrified eyes, exactly like the sort of girl who would let a dragon call her beautiful and melt into his hands. In the end, I chose one because I had to choose something. Then I stood there, staring at myself again, one hand at my jaw without meaning to, fingertips pressing lightly against the place he had touched. I jerked my hand away as though someone had caught me. "Get a grip, Sibel," I muttered to the reflection. The girl in the mirror looked unconvinced. The corridors outside the Luna quarters felt unreal. Torchlight guttered in iron sconces, painting gold across the black stone, and every line of the school seemed somehow altered by the memory of the dream. The arched ceilings looked too high, the shadows too rich. Even the polished floors seemed ready to gleam with coins if I looked at them the wrong way. I walked slowly at first, then forced myself to go faster when I realized I was drifting. Students passed me in 2s and 3s, voices low, laughter briefly echoing ahead of them, but all of it sounded muffled, as if I were moving through a second layer of reality laid over the first. More than once, I caught myself lifting my head sharply because I could have sworn I smelled it again. Sandalwood, cedar, something colder beneath. Every time I turned, there was no one there. My pulse never settled. The worst part was how exposed I felt. It wasn't just the title, not just the knowledge that half the school had seen the stones name me Luna, and the other half had probably already heard. It was the sense that something private had been opened in me and left uncovered. I felt like anyone who looked too closely would know, would see it written in my face, in the flush that hadn't fully left my skin, in the careful way I held myself together, in the fact that I kept touching my jaw, my throat, my mouth, as if checking that all of me was still where I had left it. By the time I reached the dining hall, my nerves were stretched thin enough to sing. The doors stood open. The noise inside hit first, the scrape of benches, the clash of cutlery, the rough rise and fall of dozens of conversations colliding beneath the vaulted ceiling. It spilled out into the corridor like heat from an oven, rich with firelight, meat, smoke, wine, and the living weight of too many bodies gathered under one roof. Then I stepped through the threshold and saw the hall itself. It looked like some mad architect had taken a ruined European castle and taught it how to seduce Texas money. The ceiling soared high overhead in black stone arches, ribbed like the inside of a cathedral, each curve disappearing into shadow before re-emerging in gold torchlight. Iron chandeliers hung low enough to feel heavy, their rings crowded with candles that burned beside old-fashioned electric bulbs shaped like flame, as if the school could not decide whether it wanted to belong to the past or simply own it. Torches hissed and guttered along the walls between carved pillars, their light rolling over dark limestone, silver inlay, and old wolf motifs cut so deep into the stone they looked less decorative than ancestral. The tables were long and black, each one hewn from oak so dark it drank the light. Their surfaces gleamed with polish, though scar marks and old cuts still showed beneath, giving the whole room the feel of inherited violence, cleaned up for formal use. The benches were no simple slabs either, high-backed, leather-cushioned, studded in iron, built more like something from an old hunting lodge than a school dining hall. Dark leather gleamed everywhere, on chairbacks, on trimmed seat cushions, on the straps and panels worked into the walls themselves, rich as saddlework and expensive enough to make the room feel almost indecent. And threaded through all of it was Texas, not the cheap kind, not tourist kitsch, the kind worn by old ranch money and people who wanted the world to know they came from land and blood and cattle and heat. Tooled leather panels framed parts of the wall between the stone columns. Longhorn skulls, bleached white and mounted in iron, hung high enough to look ceremonial rather than rustic. One of the massive fireplaces at the far end had antlers worked into the mantel in a way that somehow made them look noble instead of tacky. The stone was European, the leather was Texan, and the combined effect felt less like decoration than conquest, like someone had taken two old traditions of power and made them dine together. Firelight and chandelier light gleamed over black oak tables, silver cups, carved bench backs, and the shifting bodies of shifters already settled into their little constellations of rank and house. Servants moved through it all in darting, restless currents. At first, I thought they were children. Then one of them turned, and I saw the pointed ear, the two large black eyes, the sly, sharp little face beneath a tumble of pale hair. Another scuttled past, balancing a tray nearly as wide as its body, its hands too delicate and too quick, its feet silent against the stone. A third vanished beneath the edge of a tablecloth with a cluster of forks in its arms, only to emerge moments later on the other side, carrying a wine bottle twice its size. They were small, fey-like things in dark servant livery, somewhere between household spirits and underfed goblins, all quick wrists and sharp glances and eerie competence. One paused just long enough to look at me. Its eyes glimmered strangely in the torchlight, intelligent enough to unsettle me. Then It dipped its head with a movement so practiced it could have been mockery or etiquette, and darted away before I could decide whether to be offended. I wanted to ask what they were, badly. The question rose all the way to my throat and stayed there. But this school had already taught me that asking the wrong thing too early was how you ended up exposed, stupid, and bleeding in public. So I swallowed it and kept walking, even as my eyes kept snagging on them, these little, half-hidden creatures slipping between the tables, like the hall itself had grown hands and learned to serve. And just like that, the room noticed me. Not all at once, but enough. Heads turned. A conversation from a nearby pack faltered. Somewhere farther down, I heard the soft hitch of someone whispering Luna, like they still weren't sure whether the title belonged to me or to the shock of hearing it. Every instinct I had wanted to turn around and walk right back out. Then Jada's voice cut clean across the hall.
Sibel, over here!
I found her at one of the side tables, with Corin beside her. Rolo and May already halfway into their meals. Jada was leaning back like she owned the bench and the room around it, one elbow hooked over the backrest, expression unreadable in that way that always meant she had already noticed 10 things I was trying to hide. I crossed toward them. My legs worked. That was something. Jada's eyes narrowed the moment I got close enough for her to see my face properly.
Ancestors.
She muttered under her breath.
What happened to you?
My stomach dropped. Nothing, I said too quickly. Rolo looked up from his plate and blinked.
That's a lie.
Rollo, May said.
What? It is.
He pointed his fork at me, thoroughly unconcerned with subtlety.
She looks like she got caught in a storm on the way here.
Yeah,
Jada said dryly.
a dragon storm.
May choked on her drink. Rollo nearly inhaled a bite of roast whole. Heat climbed my neck so fast it hurt. Jada,
What?
she said innocently.
I'm just saying, you've got that dreamy, half-gone look. Makes me nervous. We're bound by Gaius, remember? I'm happy you're a Luna. That puts me on the fast track. But not if you get claimed on day 1 and dragged off to some lizard's terrarium to be admired between piles of shiny things.
I sat anyway and smoothed my jeans with careful hands, more because I needed something to do with them than because they needed smoothing. I felt my wolf rise at her remark. For one split second, I wanted to tell her he had an amazing hoard, full of gold and gems. That thought hit hard enough to make me go still. Nope, absolutely not. If I said anything, it would only confirm what everyone was already thinking. So I swallowed and forced my wolf down. Corin had not said a word. He was quieter than the others, but not in the shrinking way I had first met him on the bus. Something about him had shifted since the sorting. Candlelight caught along the pale planes of his face and turned them sharp instead of soft. His silver-white hair still fell untidily across his brow, and his patched bag still sat close at hand, like a shield he hadn't quite convinced himself to put down. But the way he held himself was different now, straighter, though it looked uncomfortable on him, as if some older posture had been laid over the frightened one beneath it, and both were fighting for the same body. His eyes flicked up to mine, then away, then back again, cautious and searching. I seized on that. It was safer than Jada's expression. So I guess congratulations are in order, Corin, I said. What's it actually like in Silvara? What does it mean, Night of Unsealing? His shoulders tightened at once. Jada snorted.
Straight for the open wound. Bold.
I'm asking because I don't know, I said. Corin looked down at his plate. His fingers worried the edge of his sleeve for a second before he caught himself and made them still.
It means
He swallowed.
more than I thought it would.
Well, that clears everything up.
May murmured. Corin shot her a look, so brief and startled, it almost made me smile. Then his face pulled inward again, turning serious.
It's a noble rank,
He said quietly, a note of relief slipping through despite himself.
which means I get my own room. So that's nice.
He hesitated.
And a servant rank, which sounds impossible, but it isn't, not in the courts.
His mouth twisted.
Knights aren't what we learned about in history class. A knight of Unseelie can remain landless and sell his sword, or become an advisor, or swear himself to a lady, a queen, a princess,
He paused.
or anyone high enough to command his oath.
The table had gone still around him. Rollo lowered his fork.
And if you don't?
I asked. Corin gave a tiny, humorless laugh.
Then I need to stay interesting long enough to survive.
Jada picked up the thread at once, broad and matter-of-fact, where Corin was thin and careful.
He's right.
She said.
Knight means prestige, but it also paints a target right between the shoulder blades. Unseelie don't let rank sit idle. He'll get tested, mocked, challenged.
She flicked a glance at him.
And if he falls publicly enough times, the queen can strip him.
Corin's jaw tightened.
Strip me of rank.
He said, precise now.
Demote me to drudge.
Rollo made a face.
That's a vicious system.
That's a Fae system.
May said. Corin didn't argue. I watched him for a second. Really watched him. He was proud. I could see that now. Proud in the way someone looks when they've been handed proof that their whole life was not what they were told it was supposed to be. But the pride sat on top of something raw. Fear, confusion, determination so taut it almost looked like shame. You don't hate it, I said softly. His head came up.
No,
He admitted after a beat.
I don't.
Jada leaned back, arms folded.
Of course you don't. None of us do. We just like pretending we would have preferred safety, right?
Corin ignored her.
My mother always said I was only fit for chores, housework, quiet service. She said I should learn to keep my head down and be grateful if no one noticed me long enough to make my life worse.
His eyes dropped again, but not before I caught the hurt there.
She said drudgery was the best I could hope for.
My chest tightened. And do you believe her? I asked. His fingers touched the strap of his bag, not clutching, grounding.
Now the stones said she was wrong.
He said it like he still couldn't believe the shape of the words.
Or cruel, maybe both.
The silence that followed was brief, but full. Rollo was the one who broke it, voice gentler than usual.
Well, for what it's worth, I'd rather have you with a sword at my back than on your knees polishing my boots.
May snorted into her cup. Corin actually smiled, tiny, unwilling, real. It changed his whole face. Jada caught it and pounced immediately.
Careful, Knight. That's how the Fae get you. First they make you feel valuable. Then next thing you know, you've got squires, obligations, and 3 duels before lunch.
That pulled a startled sound out of me. That might have been the beginning of a laugh. Corin glanced at me.
You say that like Luna is better. Congratulations to you as well.
My smile faltered. No, I admitted. I don't think it is. Jada clicked her tongue.
There's no safe place in this school, so forgive me if I don't weep too hard over noble rank problems. At least now you both know you're in the deep end.
Comforting, I muttered.
It should be.
Jada reached for her drink and took a long swallow before continuing.
Better than being like most first years. No idea what's coming, no help, and no warning.
Rollo leaned in slightly.
Speaking of the deep end, do we know what tomorrow looks like?
Courier delivery should be soon.
Jada said.
Schedules will come by servant. Probably one of those little creepers with a card tied up in ribbon like the school's doing us a personal favor.
I like them.
Rollo said.
They make this place feel expensive.
You would.
May muttered. I looked up. We're really just waiting for our schedules?
Tonight, yes.
Jada said.
Later tonight, you'll get more.
She ticked the points off on thick fingers.
Orientation by house sponsor. That's the professor assigned to keep your house from eating itself alive. Then dorm rules. Then a map of the school. After that, you're on your own until tomorrow, when at least one class will try to make first years cry before noon.
Which classes should we watch out for? I asked.
Clash class.
Jada gave me a grim little smile.
Wolves love to scrap in it, but luckily they put second years and first years in the same classes. Different assignments, same arena.
A cold little knot tightened in my stomach. At least I would not be alone. What about Silvara? I asked, glancing at Corin, trying to change the subject. How's your dorm? He gave a strained shrug.
So far, they're distant. I've seen my room, and it's the biggest thing I've ever had. I feel like nobility, which is weird.
He hesitated.
And the rest of the Unseelie seem to be keeping their distance.
They're deciding whether they think you're useful or entertaining.
Jada said. That is not reassuring, he muttered.
It's honest.
She replied. May set her cup down.
He'll also have to decide what kind of knight he's going to be. That matters.
Corin went still again. I looked between them. There are different kinds?
Not really hard categories,
May said.
but paths. Mercenary knight for combat challenges, mage advisor knight for magical and practical counsel, or a bodyguard as a sworn retainer.
Her dark eyes rested on Corin with unsettling intelligence.
Freedom, knowledge, or protection, in theory.
In practice,
Jada said.
every path comes with someone trying to use you. So make sure your ass is covered.
Corin let out a breath through his nose.
This is still more choice than I expected to have.
That line hit harder than any of us wanted it to. I looked down at my hands, at the denim under my palms, at the way my fingers still didn't feel entirely like my own. Too much of me still felt elsewhere. Jada noticed. Of course she did. Her eyes sharpened.
All right,
She said, tone shifting.
enough of politics. You're pale and flushed at the same time, which is frankly impressive. What actually happened to you?
Nothing, I said again, and this time, even I heard how weak it sounded. Rollo set his fork down.
That is an even worse lie than the first one.
May tilted her head.
Did you drift off on us already?
Jada's gaze slid over my face, my throat, my hands.
No. Well, yes, probably. But that's not what we're seeing.
Corin looked up fully now, then stilled. His gray eyes sharpened in a way that made me instantly regret sitting down anywhere near him. The Unseelie part of him had that look again, that slight, eerie stillness that made him seem less like an awkward first year and more like something ancient listening through him. His gaze flicked once over my face, my throat, my hands, then farther than that, into whatever clung to me. His expression changed, not dramatically, just enough. Cold concern, curiosity, recognition. His voice came low.
Something touched your aura.
I froze. Jada's eyes snapped to him.
What?
Corin swallowed once, gaze still fixed on me.
Doesn't seem to have hurt you,
He said carefully.
but something tangled with it.
His voice thinned at the edges, with visible discomfort.
It feels hot, coiled, possessive.
He hesitated.
Like a collar. Are you okay?
The image hit me all at once. Silk, treasure, a red gem at my throat. The pressure of being ornamented and claimed. My legs twitched involuntarily under the table. I looked away first. That was answer enough. Jada inhaled through her nose, then leaned toward me sharply and sniffed. My entire body went rigid. She blinked. Then her eyes widened, just enough to betray her.
Oh, you have got to be kidding me.
Jada, I hissed. She sat back slowly, staring at me as if I had walked in with a lit bomb tucked under my arm.
You smell like the dragon.
The words hit harder than they should have, not because she was wrong, because some treacherous part of me thrilled at it. Luckily, fate kept me from having to answer. Across the hall, something shifted in the Fenris ranks. A group of wolves made room at the center table, not from submission this time, but from calculation. A boy rose. He was tall in that young wolf way that hadn't fully thickened into adult bulk yet, but there was nothing uncertain in him. Dark hair, golden eyes, clean posture. One beta and two leaner wolves moved with him as he crossed the hall, not crowding, not jostling, but flanking with easy purpose. Not a pack in the dominant Derek sense, a hunting formation. Conversation thinned around him. Sub-packs noticed. So did Derek. I could feel it before I looked. The dark pressure of his attention from the Fenris table, immediate and hostile. The golden-eyed wolf stopped beside me and bowed his head, not low, but enough that the room understood what it meant.
Luna.
He said. The word didn't feel like a challenge this time. It settled differently, solid, acknowledged.
I am Alaric Voss, Alpha of the Silver Fangs.
Up close, he wasn't like Derek. There was no sharp edge trying to cut attention out of the room, no restless dominance pressing outward just to be felt. He stood like something already established, broad shoulders, steady posture, the kind of strength that didn't need to be proven every second to be believed. His presence didn't crowd me. It held space and let me step into it if I chose. And I found myself curious about what that choice would feel like.
At my right, my beta, Justin.
He continued, a slight gesture toward the wolf beside him, who inclined his head in quiet acknowledgement.
Behind me, my hunters, Owen and Bram.
The two behind him gave the same brief nod, lean and watchful, their attention not wandering even for a second. Not decoration, not status pieces. Wolves, meant for use.
I wished to be the first among Fenris to acknowledge you properly.
Something moved through the hall at that. Not loud, not obvious, but there, a shift. Pax listening, measuring. Derek's attention snapping tight somewhere across the room. Felt more than seen. Alaric didn't look at any of them, only me.
The stones named you Luna,
he said, calm, certain.
Let lesser wolves sneer if they like. I will not.
That landed deeper than I expected, not because of the words themselves, but because there was nothing hidden behind them. No edge, no game, just respect, given plainly and in front of everyone who might challenge it.
I offer you my protection,
he said.
Until you refuse it, I and mine stand with you. No harm reaches you without crossing us first. You have my fangs if you need them.
My breath caught before I could stop it. That wasn't a gesture. That was a line drawn through the room. Jada's hand closed around my forearm under the table, firm and grounding.
Careful.
She murmured, low enough that only I could hear.
This matters. I'll tell you what to say. Repeat after me.
I knew it mattered. I just didn't know how to stand inside it yet. Alaric didn't rush me. He didn't press. He simply waited, gaze steady, posture unchanged, as if he trusted the weight of what he'd said to hold on its own. My wolf stirred, not like before, not dizzy, not pulled off balance. She lifted her head, alert, interested, aware of him in a way that felt right, measured, something she could approach without losing herself. I stood, and Jada stood with me. The movement quieted more of the room than I expected, like the sound of it carried outward in a ripple. I could feel eyes shifting, attention narrowing, the space tightening around the moment. Alaric straightened slightly, not looming, not advancing, just meeting me where I was. I looked at him, really looked at him. There was strength there, obvious and grounded, the kind that came from use, not display. But more than that, there was restraint. He could have taken more space, could have pushed, could have made this something louder, sharper, harder to refuse. He hadn't. That mattered more than the strength. Alaric Voss, I said, and my voice held steadier than I felt, with Jada giving me the right words. You offer me your strength, your pack, and your protection. Something flickered across his expression. Approval, maybe, recognition. I drew in a breath and continued, lifting my chin just enough to meet him evenly. I accept what you give freely, and I acknowledge your loyalty before Fenris. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the room shifted, not in sound, but in weight, in attention, in the quiet recalculation of everyone who had just watched the exchange and understood exactly what it meant. Alaric bowed his head more deeply this time.
Then we stand with you.
Behind him, Justin struck his fist once against his chest. Owen and Bram followed, the sound sharp and clean in the space between conversations. It carried, and something changed. Not submission, not unity, alignment. Lines redrawn in a way that didn't need to be announced. They took a table near ours, close enough to matter, far enough to be deliberate. I felt it settle around me, unfamiliar and heavy. Not safety, exactly, but something closer to it than I had felt since arriving here. My breath had slowed without me noticing. My shoulders had lowered. Even the tension in my hands eased, like my body had decided before I did that he was safe to stand near. Jada leaned back beside me, satisfaction threading through her posture.
Well,
She murmured under her breath.
that's one way to start. Already getting boys lining up to swear to protect your honor. You might just survive Derek yet.
I should have felt stronger. I did, a little. Enough that my shoulders eased. Enough that my breathing steadied. Enough that my wolf settled instead of pacing. Enough to understand, for the first time, what it meant not to be completely alone in a room like this. I could feel Alaric's gaze linger on me a moment longer. There was something in it, not claiming, not demanding, just present, steady, warm in a way that didn't burn. It made my chest tighten differently than before. Not heat, not danger, something grounded, something that made sense, something my wolf could stand beside without losing herself. And that pulled, too. Then I saw it, a flash of green across the room. Victor. He was already looking at me, and something in me answered before I could stop it. Heat coiled low and sharp, winding through my stomach, my chest, my throat. My fingers tightened against the edge of the table. My breath caught, shallow and sudden. My wolf surged, not curious, not measured, hungry. She wanted to go to him now, not later, not privately, not safely. She wanted to leave the table, cross the hall in front of everyone, and put herself straight back under that gaze, like nothing in the world was more natural. The thought horrified me and made my skin burn. I stayed where I was. Self-consciousness pinned me harder than any command could have. I could feel my own body too acutely, the flush in my cheeks, the pulse in my throat, the softness of my mouth, the humiliating way my thighs wanted to press together again under the table. I hated the idea of anyone seeing it. Derek, Alaric, Jada, Clotho, anyone. So I sat perfectly still instead, or tried to, but inside me, everything leaned toward him. The pull felt magnetic now, not just attraction, not just hunger, something slower, heavier, something that felt inevitable. Victor's eyes held mine for one beat longer. Then he looked away. The loss of it hit me like a physical thing. I drew in a breath too sharp to hide and lowered my gaze to my untouched plate. Around me, the hall resumed its noise in fragments, packs reforming, whispers rising, Fenris already adapting to the new shape of the night, but none of it felt fully real. Not while his scent still haunted me, not while my aura still ached where his had touched it, not while my wolf stood inside me, trembling and eager, waiting for darkness to fall again. And deep down, in the place I least wanted to be honest, I knew the truth. If he came back into my dreams tonight, I would go to him, and this time I wouldn't stop myself.
Now you know what it means to catch a dragon's attention. Like this chapter, subscribe, and come back for the next one. I'm not finished with you yet.